the important bit is that we as a church move as a cohesive, and we don't each go on our own little, I think, yeah. Because I think if we just do this, me, I'm on my mission, I'm the social justice hero, it becomes difficult, and it's something that I think the church needs to move in as an agreement. But that's, I think, where we also need to pray that, again, each of us sees the same vision, you know? I mustn't pray, dear Lord, let that person see my vision. I must pray, dear Lord, please let us all see your vision. Because if we're seeing different visions, then maybe we're not seeing the Lord's vision. Maybe one or two people are seeing it. But we must pray that we all get on the same page as a church and then move together. Yeah. Because I just want to emphasize again, I've been tempted into the social justice thing of I'm the social justice warrior. I'm going to solve the world's problems. No, you're not. Christ uses his body, and we can, we must align ourselves together to try and get on that same page. And I think that's the point where to start. Yeah. And I think if we're all on the same page, we're not going to have this temptation to say, how far should we go? Because then we're, in a sense, internally holding each other accountable. And then I'm not going to have this conflict of, did I go too far? Did I stray too far on the one side or just stay behind on the other side? Yeah. Okay. So can we go to the next slide? I don't know. I feel we go down these big avenues, but I love it. I love it. Maybe the slides are too boring, I think. Inequality has increased in South Africa. Okay. And how has it increased? Remember I showed you that it's gone from 6 times the difference between white and black to 5 times? Actually, the differences between race groups have narrowed a bit, but within race groups it's grown. Okay. And here, especially, we talk about the rise of the black middle class, and this comes to your comments about BEE, right? When I said to you, BEE has benefited a small group, a small middle class that hasn't had broad-based effects. Okay. Here, I've given you sort of a division of South African society. Okay, so the bottom 30% about is mainly social grants. The top 20% pays almost all of taxes in South Africa. So you've got this really polarized society, right? Bottom 30%, we spoke about dependency. Bottom 30% that depends on the government for its income. And the top 20% that's in essence generating that income. This is a recipe for social conflict, right? And a very small middle class. Now and that middle class isn't even really a middle class. That middle 50% doesn't pay tax. That middle 50% doesn't pay tax. Okay, so clearly we know from the literature that a big middle class is important for social stability. But we've, in a sense, got a missing middle. I know the missing middle is a key word in education nowadays. But just in broader society, we've got a missing middle. And when there's a missing middle, you've got 2 poles, and those 2 poles look to each other. So the question is actually, how do we develop this middle class? How do we flesh it out so that we have a more stable economic society from an economic perspective, and with that then maybe also stabilize us socially? So I think obviously the answer is not just economic, as we've been discussing, there's these spiritual aspects. But the point is, what this shows you, that there is already large redistribution in South Africa. But despite this large redistribution, we still haven't seen this change in social stratification. We still haven't seen these poles coming together socially. So this really is, in a sense, a worrying picture for the future. So this plots the Gini coefficient. Now, the Gini coefficient measures inequality. If it's 0, it means everybody in society has exactly the same income. If it's 1, it means only one person owns everything in society. Okay? So South Africa, as you see here, has this Gini coefficient that is incredibly close to 1. It's the highest in the world, 0.77. Okay, 0.77. We have other countries here. This blue one, the closest to us, is Brazil, 0.57. Okay. Now, this is what government does to change this Gini coefficient. First of all, we tax. And what it means is that the inequality declines a little bit. In other words, my taxes means that the rich pay more taxes than the poor, and therefore the inequality declines a bit. But here's a big jump. It's actually the social grants reduce inequality dramatically. So we're moving from a 0.77 to a 0.67. That is a very, very big change in inequality. So the social grants make a big difference. Then we have indirect taxes, that's VAT, things like that, not a big difference. But here we have this very, very big drop to 0.59. And what is that? That's social expenditure, it's health, it's education. And what it suggests to us that these things are targeted very well at the poor. Okay? So in South Africa, we have, in our education system, we have what we call no-fee schools. So technically, I know this doesn't always happen in practice, but the poorest 40 to 60% of schools are not allowed to charge school fees, okay, to enable access to education. And access to education up to grade 9 is almost universal in South Africa. It's unprecedented for a developing country. It's huge. So in that sense, yes, we've ticked the boxes. We've ticked the boxes, right? We've really expanded these social opportunities for people. We've also expanded healthcare, and I gather you're involved in healthcare, is that right? Okay, so please correct me if I say things that are incorrect, right? So we have basically free basic services in terms of healthcare, which means that most people have access to the basics for free, okay, at clinics. And currently the national health insurance is coming in, so that's being started actually from this year, where we'll have a system like in the UK where healthcare is in some senses fully nationalized. Okay, so wonderful. Once we do all of this expenditure, South Africa does a really great job as the government to reduce inequality. But the point is this really changing the outcomes on the ground? Okay, so a big issue in South Africa is the quality of education and the quality of healthcare, right? So we have some of the worst, we perform the worst in education quality in the world. So we've got lots of education, but of poor quality. It's a trade-off, right? It's a trade-off. And if you've got lots of education that's of poor quality, it's not necessarily going to change things. So again, the question is, the big story in education is, it's accountability. It's accountability and bringing school principals to account for managing schools correctly. Okay, if you can get the next graph, it gives you, this is where you see the picture. This is, again, from poorest to richest, from 1 to 10. And it gives you an idea of the percentage where people get their income from. In 1993, the poorest got 30% of their income from the labor market, from jobs. But the red bar also, because that's called remittances, that's where you have a family member that works somewhere else and they send money home. So even so, approximately 80% of the household income came from jobs. We are no longer there. Okay, what's the big thing? It's now the purple government. The purple government. So the question is, we are relying on the government to solve the problem. There's no more space for the government to do it. We need new solutions. Yes.
Just another curveball. I'll try and communicate my thoughts as clearly as possible.
Yes.
So, looking back into history, just the organization of Africa as a whole, but we focus on South Africa, in terms of the economic setup, pre-colonization and post-colonization. And in terms of what he sort of touched on, belief systems and the implications on the economy. So we understand South Africa to be multicultural, multi-ideological. So in terms of expectation and goal setting and just how much you want to gain from the economy, how do you cater for that in a society like South Africa? For example, if you look at colonization societies, what were their economic goals? What did they want to achieve with their economies? And if you look at the European economies, what was the drive? What was what put a cap on what they wanted? And how do you marry the two? For example, housing or transport or I know it's very difficult.
Let me try and give you a short answer. Okay. The process of colonization concurred with the process of industrialization. Okay. So in some senses, what we also need to compare is a pre-industrial to a post-industrial society. So in pre-industrial societies, let's just think Europe. There wasn't this great thing of enterprise. You know, people did work for their own and for the feudal master, right? So there was great inequality, the landholders and the peasants, okay? That wasn't necessarily the case, let's say, in Africa, where people were a lot more nomadic. But people lived off the land, right? It was the same in Europe, okay? But then industrialization took off in Europe, and in some senses, the colonial power brought it here. They were still learning about industrialization at that stage. They hadn't figured it out themselves. So it was in some senses the system in flux, together with colonialism, in this new context, but industrialization hadn't been established in that sense, even at home. So in that sense, it was quite quite mixed up, right? And we all, I think in some senses, we're still trying to marry these worlds, the two economies, as I said, the industrialized economy, and in some senses, should the second economy be integrated with the industrial economy, or should we develop the second economy? And I think the answer is twofold. The two economies should coexist, I think. Because as I said, there's a role for informality, there's a role for household agriculture, but they should influence each other in a good way. They shouldn't displace each other, but they should work together in that sense that the second economy gets resources from the first economy. But the second economy also supplies resources to the first economy. I don't know if we have clarity on how that interaction should work, but I think there's a role for that.